Hello, I am Luba Vangelova. I am the founder of The Hub, which is an online hub for homeschooled tweens and teens. And I am joined today by Dr. Peter Gray, who has written a number of influential books and publications on the topics of education and play, but I'll let him talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you. I'm a research professor of psychology and neuroscience at Boston College. I've long been retired from teaching and administrative duties, but continue to do research. I have, for many years, been conducting research into children's natural ways of learning and into the kinds of environments in which they learn best. A lot of my research has focused on children's play because I've become convinced that natural selection endowed children with this very strong drive to play, because play is how children practice the kinds of skills that they most need to become effective adults. So that's an introduction. I've written a book called Free to Learn, which was a number of years ago, and since then published many other articles and chapters that are available on my personal website if anybody's interested in that.
All right. And so you mentioned play, and you mentioned children, but in your view, what is the role of play once young people get out of what we typically consider childhood, so past age 8 or so? What is the role of play during adolescence?
So I think traditionally play, as children grow older, play becomes somewhat more structured and formal. Sometimes we begin to call it hobbies rather than play. So children are playing at various things. They are developing interests and passions, and as they get older, they may be engaging in those things in a somewhat more formal way. They this has, unfortunately, we've kind of destroyed this because we keep adolescents so busy all the time that they don't have the opportunity for hobbies and interests. So that's one way to think about play for teenagers. The other way to think about it is, until recently, what kids would do when they're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old is they'd go out to the schoolyard or the playground and they'd play pickup basketball with other kids. They'd play roller skate hockey with other kids. I used to do a lot of that when I was a college student in New York. I'd go out and play with the high school kids. They were out playing. They didn't stop playing when they were teenagers. But they were doing pickup games. Pickup games of baseball in the park, softball in the park, and this was normal play. This is what teenagers did. Unfortunately, as a society, we have largely destroyed that. We've destroyed the opportunity for it. We need to bring it back. Yeah, there's no reason under the sun that kids who've reached beyond 12 years old shouldn't be out there playing with other kids.
And so Um, could you kind of unpack where playing in organized sports fits in vis-a-vis your concept of play?
So, so what, there's two ways to think about organized sports. There's the sports that are organized by the kids themselves, and there's sports organized by adults. They're entirely different things.
Mhm,
Sports organized by adults is like more school.
mhm.
It's still adults telling kids what to do. It's adults solving their problems for them. It's adults teaching them how to play the game. It's adults creating the rules. When kids go out and make their own game, the kids are learning how to take charge. They're learning how to create rules. They're learning how to settle arguments. They're learning how to keep their playmates happy, because if you don't keep your playmates happy, they'll all quit. I like to talk about, I tend to take the example of baseball because I played a lot of pickup baseball when I was a kid. And then when I was in high school, I played on the formal, organized, adult directed high school team. And so it's easy for me to talk about the difference. What you learn when you are playing your own pickup game are lots of really important lessons about life. You are learning how to negotiate because you've got to figure out the sides. You've got to negotiate everything. Who's going to be on what side, who's not. You've got to create the rules. Likely, the way you used to play, you're playing on a vacant lot someplace, and it's not a manicured baseball field. You've got to figure out what are the ground rules. No hitting it over in that direction because there's windows in the building over there, or in that direction there's a busy street. So anything in those that goes out that way, that's an automatic out. You figure this is all worked out by the kids themselves. You've got big kids, you've got little kids. You've got to hit softly to the little kids. You realize that this team, that these, you've created, you're really playing to have fun. But to have fun, you're also playing your best. But nobody in the long run cares about winning. What you care about is having a good game, keeping it going, having fun, keeping your playmates happy, because if they're not happy, they'll quit and go home and the game will be over. You are learning there very valuable life lessons. When an adult has taken over this, none of those lessons are learned. The adult-directed game may be good for learning how to bunt a ball or slide into second base, but how many people really need those skills as lifelong skills? Tiny fraction of people. Everybody needs the kinds of skills that you learn in the pickup game.
Mm.
So when we talk about play for teenagers and even for young adults, because young adults used to go out and play this way too, we're talking about something that we've pretty much destroyed as a culture. This was what I've interviewed and surveyed anthropologists who've studied people in hunter-gatherer cultures. They continue to play even into young adulthood. They play in age-mixed groups. They play pickup games. They play. It's not a matter of somebody in authority telling them how to play. They're negotiating everything as they go along. This is the natural way to play, and it does not end at age 12.
Mhm, mhm. Um, so you mentioned before we started recording that you've been looking at the research on what the contributing factors are to the alarming, alarming and unfortunately high rates of anxiety, depression, and so on among young people. And you mentioned the deprivation of independent activity as being a key factor. Could you please elaborate on how that leads? What's the correlation or causation, rather, with that and anxiety, depression, and so on?
Well, first of all, just over time, there are many ways of looking at this correlationally, and they all converge on the same idea. But over time, really ever since the mid-1950s, we have been with every decade depriving young people of independent activities, independent from adults, more than we did in the previous decade. So children, when I was a kid in the 1950s, at age 5, I could ride my bicycle anywhere in town. And if I went with my 6-year-old friend, I could ride it out of town. Now we're not letting 11-year-olds ride their bicycles on their own. We have over time, for a variety of reasons, we have increasingly taken children's freedom to move independently, freedom to play independently, freedom to get together with friends away from adults and do their own thing. With every decade, there's less of that freedom. With every decade, there is more anxiety by standardized tests, more depression by standardized tests, higher rates of suicide by CDC data. Over the last 70 years, really, it has been a huge increase in anxiety, depression, and suicide rates. This didn't just start recently. This has been going on for decades, this increased rate of mental disorder among young people. And it has coincided with a loss of their freedom to act independently. There's a certain sense in which you can say that the whole purpose of childhood, the reason we have such a long juvenile period, is because it takes time to learn how to be independent. But you can't learn how to be independent if you don't have practice with being independent. So we are depriving children of that kind of practice by guarding them all the time, by adults always being in their face, by adults always telling them what to do and what not to do, and solving their problems for them. So I think that by virtue of this over control, over monitoring, over surveillance of children, we're depriving them of the activities that they need in order to learn that they can solve their own problems. And if you don't believe you can solve your own problems, that sets you up for anxiety and depression. So over the same years that we've been depriving children of independent activities, and over those same years that anxiety and depression have been increasing, we also know that the sense of agency, which in one terminology for it is internal locus of control. There's actually a standardized questionnaire to assess what psychologists call locus of control, which runs from a strong internal locus of control, meaning the sense of I can control my own fate, I can solve my own problems, I'm sort of the master of my destiny. At the other extent, the other extreme of it, the sense of I'm a victim of powerful other people, of circumstance, and so on and so forth. I'm pretty helpless to take care of myself. Most of us, of course, are in the middle, but this is a whole dimension. You can be more or less in any direction. Well, clinical psychologists have long known that to the degree that you are in that external end, where you feel like you're a victim, to that degree, you are very prone to anxiety and depression. To the degree that you feel you're in control, you are quite resilient. You are quite protected from anxiety and protection. Well, over the same period, the same historical period, there's a version of this test that's been given to teenagers. And with every generation, teenagers score more towards the external end than they did before. Internal locus of control is going down. Not surprisingly, because in order to develop this sense of I can control things, I can solve problems, you have to have practice doing it. And we're not giving them the practice doing it because we're taking charge of their life. So that's one argument. But then there's a lot of other studies. So for example, there's research showing that those kids who do have more opportunity for whatever reason, who do have more free time, more opportunity to play, they're doing better psychologically than those who have less by a number of different measures. So I could go on with many more such examples, but so what I've described is when children are behaving independently, whether they're going by themselves on public transportation, bicycling to friends' houses some distance away, going on walks with themselves, having part-time jobs, which we're also kind of depriving children of these days, they are out there having to figure things out themselves, and they're learning that they can figure things out themselves. They can solve problems. But when we deprive children of those things, they don't have those opportunities, and therefore they don't develop this internal courage and confidence, agency, whatever you want to call it, internal locus of control that is necessary for psychological well-being. On top of that, there's a kind of a no-brainer answer to all of this, which is play and independent activities in the immediate sense is what makes young people happy. you know, they feel good about it. That's almost by definition. Play is doing what you want to do. It's what makes you happy. And especially by the time you're a teenager, but even when you're much younger, you get pride out of doing things yourself.
Mm,
And when that's taken away, we're taking away a lot of what is an immediate sense of satisfaction and joy. You know, uh, a famous play researcher, Brian Sutton Smith, who died a few years ago, who used to say in talks that the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. And I don't usually say that because the grammar doesn't quite work for me. But the takeaway play is going to lead to depression. It should be obvious. That doesn't have to be proven. Imagine life without play. Well, that's what we're creating for children.
mhm. So it's interesting because I mean, there is a certain common sense that play and work are opposites, but I've been writing a careers column for Science Teacher magazine for about 10 years now. So I've interviewed many, many scientists and engineers, and a very high proportion of them talk about, they literally use the word play when
Right.
describing their work. Well, I play around with this and I play around with these ideas. I play around, to come up
Right.
with prototypes. That word comes up a lot. So it's interesting that it is not valued more highly as something to encourage during.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point. Yeah, it's not the case that play and work are opposites. You could make the case that play and toil are opposites, where
Mm,
toil is work that you don't enjoy. It's something you feel you have to do, but you really don't want to do. Work, meaning employment or meaning doing something productive, can be more or less playful, and partly depending on your attitude about it, but also depending on the conditions. There's actually research. What is the kind of employment that people regard as fun? That people say, even if I won the lottery, I would still be doing this, right? That's an indication that this is play for them, that they would still choose to do it, even though they don't need to do it for money anymore. Well, the kinds of jobs are jobs where there's a lot of independence, where you are in charge of how you do it, where there's creativity, where there's challenge. The worst jobs are the boring, tedious jobs where there's no mental or physical challenge to it, but you just got to slog through it. That's the kind of thing. And the other characteristic is the worst kind of jobs are those that are micromanaged by a boss, where there's a boss standing over you, telling you exactly what to do, and you have to do it in exactly that way. You have no choice about it, and you're constantly being judged and evaluated. Isn't it interesting? This is school. This is exactly what we do in school. And then we wonder why kids don't like school.
right. And although perhaps kind of on a more granular level, there are schools and then there are schools because.
Yeah, I'm talking about school as we usually think of it, the way that the public schools and most private schools are set up.
Right, the conventional model. So let's talk a little bit then about technology and how much of a role technology can play in allowing such opportunities. Because what I hear a lot from parents in terms of um, barriers to more independent activity is there aren't that many other kids out there doing independent activity. So, there's a certain kind of feeling of safety in numbers that, I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing.
Right,
But
right.
also just the need to, if people if people's friends aren't within an easy walk or bike ride and kids can't drive yet, there are a lot of logistical challenges, and parents are kind of running themselves ragged, trying to take this child to this and this child to that, and they have different friends from different families and different schedules. Everyone's kind of crazy busy. So how effective do you see technology intermediated play as being in serving these needs?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot in what you just said, and I do want to say something about, well, why do we have to drive kids places? Why can't we just say go by bus, walk? Why do we have to drive them? Why do we feel that's our responsibility? Let's let the kids go by themselves. Certainly by the time they're teenagers, they can go by themselves. They can find a way to get there. This is exactly the problem that we are creating by feeling like we parents have to do everything for the kids. They would rather go by themselves. So if a kid wants to get together with their friend, tell them, all right, so, it's a mile away. That's an easy walk. Or it's 5 miles away. Look, there's a bus. Take the bus. I'll give you the fare for the bus. Or you can earn the fare for the bus. This is how kids always used to get together. And there's no reason they can't get together this way today. Certainly by the time they're teenagers, they're safe. So I've seen moms who are way smaller than their son, feeling like they have to be with their son to guard him. I think it's the other way around. This is crazy. This belief that we always have to be carting our kids around, that they can't get any place, even when they're teenagers. We've got to get over this. So that's number one. But number two, given that we are preventing kids from getting together on their own, what's the second best option? It's to get together on the internet. It's to get together through social media, through texting one another, this is why we see kids on their iPhone so often. They're connecting with one another. Kids, especially by the time they're teenagers, and this is worldwide, this is just a characteristic of teenagers, need lots of time to hang out with other teenagers away from adults. There used to be places where they would hang out in the physical world. Even when my own son was a kid, you'd find gangs of teenagers at shopping malls. That would be the hangout place for teens. Before that, it was diners or street corners, or, kids always had hangout places. Hunter-gatherer kids spend huge amounts of time together every day. This is part of growing up away from adults, where you're talking about things you don't necessarily want to share with adults. You're trying out different ways of being, and in the protection of being away from people who are going to judge you for it. So that's extremely important. Now, the only way that most teenagers can do that is through social media. And it's interesting that there's actually been studies where you ask kids about what they're doing on social media, and they primarily say, well, I'm hanging out with my friends. I'm keeping in touch with my friends. I'm sharing my experiences with my friends. And when you ask them, well, why don't you do it in person? They say it's because either I or my friend is not allowed to go out in person. The parent doesn't allow them. Or the shopping mall, if we can't hang out in shopping malls, even if both our parents do, because the security guards chase us away. We have created a world that is very unfriendly to teens. And so teens can only get together in this way. Now we hear people wanting to take social media away from teens. That would be cruel. So this is the situation they're in. It is not ideal. I don't think it's ideal, but it is way better than not being able to get together at all. There's one quick, it's a little bit of a digression, but I think it's relevant. So during COVID, of course, during the COVID lockdown, kids were not able to get together physically, even to the degree that they could before, because they weren't seeing one another in school anymore. They weren't going out to adult-directed activities where at least there'd be some opportunity to see their friends there and maybe play on the sidelines as the formal activity was going on. But and so I actually, through an organization that I'm involved with called Let Grow, we did two major surveys of how kids were doing during the COVID lockdown. During the early months of it, surveyed 1,600 families so lockdown occurred in March of 2020. We did one survey in April and another one in May, in the middle of April, middle of May, of families that had children between the age of 8 and 13. We surveyed both the children themselves and the parents, and what we found was, interestingly, they were doing well. They were doing better than they had been before COVID. When you ask them about anxiety levels, they would say they're less anxious now than they were before. When you ask the parents, the parents would say the same thing about their kids. The parents would say, I'm really proud of what my child is doing. My child is doing all kinds of interesting things that he or she didn't have time before, and I'm impressed by how inventive they are. And the other thing, why is it that they were not suffering from the lack of interaction? Because they were online with their friends. They were playing games, they were playing video games with their friends, they were playing other games. Many kids said, I learned new ways of interacting online during this time because it was the only way I could connect with my friends.
Mhm.
So that was an extreme example of isolation, and yet kids weren't suffering because they could connect by virtue
Mhm.
of social media and other platforms.
Yeah. And I was just thinking back to the age before online and social media, et cetera. And I don't think I was alone in spending hours and hours and hours on the phone with friends. Like,
Yes,
I did not necessarily, feel the need to see my friends in person in order to
right.
feel, like there was social connection and kind of relating going on, connecting. And so, in a certain sense, I think, the online world has maybe replaced like all those many, many hours of phone conversations that I don't know, maybe it was more prevalent among girls than boys. I don't know. But I think that, that is probably one phenomenon that's happened.
I think you're absolutely right. I remember that period too. And you're right, it was more girls than boys in my experience also. And even today, I think it's girls are more online on social media, boys are online playing video games with one another.
Hmm, interesting. Um, yes, so that's a whole topic unto itself.
Right.
But the whole video games and how much they fulfill some of these needs. But yeah, that's a whole kind of topic unto itself. And so, what about the idea of scaffolding? So, you're talking about adolescents and playing together, but you've also talked about the importance of mixed ages. And that way, one of the benefits being that older children or young people can kind of scaffold and serve as a role model for younger people. So, isn't there also a role for kind of older people in the lives of adolescents, an important kind of mentoring or scaffolding role?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think so. My studies of scaffolding have been in a democratic school. Most of my that research was at the Sudbury Valley School, where there are children from the age of 4 on through high school age, on through 18, sometimes 19, all interacting one another. So the scaffolding that I was observing was often scaffolding of where you had a teenager playing with a younger child, and in order to enable the play, the teenager is, in some sense, boosting the younger child up to a higher level of activity to be able to play. It might even be, for example, they're playing a game that involves adding up numbers or calculating averages, and the younger child doesn't know how to do that, so the older child points out how to do that as part of playing the game, or if they're playing a physical game, They are enabling the younger child to play the game by, for example, pitching very softly to that younger child. So they're scaffolding the child into the game. Or I've seen card games where there are younger children, maybe 8 or 9, 10 years old, playing with older teenagers. And the younger kids, if they were playing by themselves, they would lose track of the rules. They would, the game would fall apart. They don't have the attention span for it. But they can play these games with older kids because the older kids are keeping them on track. Not because the older kids are deliberately trying to teach them, but just because in order to play the game, you've got to keep them on track. And so that's the context in which I've studied scaffolding. But the same thing could happen in natural interactions, and probably did happen at that school, though it wasn't the focus of my attention, in sort of natural interactions between especially older kids and adults, where they would get into a discussion or they would be doing something together, and the adult might be more skilled than the older child, and the adult is kind of scaffolding the older child into it. I think this occurs naturally in the course of interactions where you have a kind of free interaction that involves adults and younger children. There's no magic age at which all of this changes, and I think it's especially common for younger adults to still have many of the same interests as teenagers do, and they're doing things together, and in the process you get the same kind of scaffolding that you otherwise would.
Mm.
So I think that that's true. I think
And
that, yeah, go ahead.
oh, and I was going to say, the in the mixed stages, the older um, individuals also gain something from it. It's not just the younger ones being scaffolded that are gaining something.
Well, that's right. And the older ones are gaining, when we're talking about teenagers and younger kids, or even when we're talking about younger kids, some older than others, the older ones are learning a lot about themselves. They're learning that I can be a leader, I can be a caregiver, I can be helpful to other people. I'm not just somebody who needs help, I'm somebody who can be helpful to other people. They're also gaining a sense of their own maturity by virtue of seeing that, I am the mature one here. I'm the one who can be helpful to this other one. And they are also in the context of, especially if there's not a big status difference between them. And that's why often I think teenagers are better than adults at this, because there's less of a status difference, that you can have a more of a real give and take. Not that this can't happen with adults, but it is easier for it to happen when it's a teenager and a younger child. You can have a real give and take where the younger child is not hesitant to challenge the older child. And I would see this at the Sudbury Valley School. So for example, I'll just give you an example. At the time we were doing our study, it happened that chess was a big game at the school. And there were kids who were kind of new to chess, and younger kids just learning it. There were older kids who were pretty good at it. And oftentimes you would see an age mixed game of chess that was where the older player would self-handicap in various ways, give up some of the chess pieces right at the beginning, and would also be pointing out moves to the younger child. So it became a kind of a teaching experience for the younger child, but it was also an opportunity for the older child to try out moves that they wouldn't otherwise try out in a game with somebody who's a chess peer. But what you would see sometimes is the older child would say, no, no, don't move your pawn this way. That's a bad move. And the younger child would say, why? And the older child would not necessarily know why. The older one would have learned that that's a bad move, would know it's a bad move, but not really know why it's a bad move. And so that leads the older one to think, well, let me get back to you on that. And I think we've all had that experience when we're in the role of teacher, whether it's informal teaching like this, just in normal interaction, or it's more formal teaching. We've all had that experience. If if we are teaching somebody who's not afraid to us or ask us or why and get it, and that leads to a discussion, and then and now who's the learner and who's the teacher? You're both learners and you're both teachers. It's a back and forth interaction. And so I think that that's another thing that happens more in an age mix context, because it's more likely to be the case that one person knows more than the other, and is helping the other person, but then you get into this back and forth discussion about it.
Yeah. And um, I I would say it also probably helps the older individual be able to articulate their thoughts better in a way that someone else can understand, to learn to communicate
I
more.
think that's right. It's one thing, yeah, when you're if you're going to explain something to somebody else, you've got to really clarify it in your own mind so that you can put it into words that somebody else who's new to this can understand it. And that really means that you've got to understand it very well. So I
Mhm.
think that, Lev Vygotsky, the great Russian psychologist of the 1920s into the 30s, who really developed the idea of that we now call scaffolding, uh, also developed the idea that critical thinking develops from dialogue. It develops from back and forth questioning. So, I might believe I know something, but then I tell it to you, and you say, well, what about this? And I hadn't thought about that before, but now I've got to answer you. And so I've got to begin to examine my own statement. And according to Vygotsky, at some point after a lot of such dialogue, we begin to internalize that. So I can have my internal Luba who's questioning what I'm saying, and can have this dialogue within my own head. And that's what we call sort of critical thinking by yourself. But
Mm,
it develops first in dialogue. And so having these opportunities for real back and forth dialogue, whether it's people the same age or people different in age, is extremely valuable for
mhm.
mental development.
And would you say that there's a certain um, organic feature to dialogue that is most useful versus something that's kind of intentional and scripted with a goal ahead of time, or
Well, I think that depends on whose goal it is. If it's the child's goal, if it's the younger person's goal, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. If it's the older person's goal, then it begins to become controlling. It begins to become patronizing. It begins to be annoying. It can be, and so I think one has to be careful about that. I think that dialogue works best when it's genuine, when you're not there in order to improve the other person. You are there because you want to be there, and the improvement is a side effect.
mm, yeah, interesting. Interesting framework to think of it. Hmm. So then, in terms of all this, so one thing I mentioned before we started recording is a distinction that I recently saw a homeschooling parent make in a Facebook group between socialization, of which there are manifold opportunities, even if kids are doing directed activities and so on, they are around other children, but as she pointed out, it's friendship that is much rarer and that you have to really work at. Can you just talk a little bit about that difference and the different benefits derived from that?
Yeah, so certainly for younger children, um, a friend is somebody you play with, that you play with regularly. Friendships develop in play. That's how friendships develop. Almost by definition, a friend for a young child is somebody you play with. So playing consistently with the same group of people is how young kids make friends. Older kids may make friends in play also, but sometimes they're just getting together for play with a group of people who just like to play that thing, and they're not necessarily communicating in other ways. Older kids make friends in the way that I just described. They're hanging out together for hours and hours a day, whether it used to be on the telephone or in person, or now it's on social media. This is how friendships work today. Friends are, of course, extraordinarily important. Um, I'm going to step back just a little bit and point out that psychologists have shown in really hundreds of experiment and hundreds of research studies, I should say, that there are really three requirements that all of us, regardless of our age, need for mental well-being. One is autonomy, in the sense that we can make our own choices, at least about many things, and we can control our own activities. The second is competence, that not only can we choose to do things, but we can do them. We're capable of doing them. We have the competence to do the things we want to do. And the third, equally important to the others, is relationship, which really means friends. We need to have friends to be happy. We need to have friends who are peers in the sense that they're not authority figures over us. They're not our parents. They're our friends. They're our peers. And these are the people we need for social support. And without them, we are unhappy. We're lonely. By and large, there are personality differences in all of this. Some people need it more than others. But all human beings need this kind of, essentially all human beings need this for we need emotional support, as well as practical support from people who are friends, who care about us, who are going to help us. And so this is extremely important. One of the problems when when kids just go out to activities, you're only meeting these other people around the activity. You're not hanging out necessarily in other situations, and you're not making friends. You used to make friends in the neighborhood. You used to make friends in school, but then you would hang out together after school for hours and hours after school, and that would be how your friendship was cemented. So friendship is really very, very important, and I think our current uh, uh, I'm going to skip that because I'm not thinking of the name right now. But there's a lot being written about loneliness in our society, not just among kids, but among adults as well. Have become a lonely society. I know people who have gone and studied hunter-gatherer groups or other indigenous groups, and they're sad to come back to our society because everybody's together in those groups. You make friends. People. Sometimes it's a little shocking because there's no privacy. But at some point, you feel like I don't really want to go to this much privacy as I've got back at home as I had before. It's part of the human condition that we really need. We need friends. With people who we see every day, who we see regularly, and most of us don't have that now.
Mhm, mhm. And so, on that note, artificial intelligence. It's becoming a bigger topic in education with a number of AI tutoring services or platforms that are getting progressively better and better. So, given what you've just said, how much do you see AI being to replace, if any, of the things that you've mentioned? Um, or what will be kind of the elements of education that you can't imagine ever properly being replaced by artificial intelligence?
Well, so I guess if you think about it, access to information has been tremendously promoted by technology. And think of it, really. Who of us would want to give up the internet? Who in their right mind would want to give it up? We have for educational purposes, it should have absolutely revolutionized how we think about education. You no longer have to go to some building in order to get the information you want. You don't have to go to a school for it. You don't have to a school building for it. You don't have to go to a library for it. You just got it on the tips of your fingers. You have to have some discernment to figure out, what's reliable and what's not reliable. But that's always been true. What the teacher told you wasn't necessarily reliable either. And we now know that the encyclopedias that everybody used to look at weren't reliable either. So, it's just whoever, but yeah, we've got such access to information. And I'm not an expert on AI, but it's a next step up in order to, in order to get information, in order to solve, in order to look at certain kinds of solutions, certain kinds of problems. But that's not going to replace friendship, and that's not going to replace, the value of real dialogue with another human being. Maybe you'll have dialogues with, with an AI being, and maybe that'll be interesting. But I don't think it's going to replace the kind of sense that we have that comes from the fact that we're communicating with somebody who not only is thinking but is also feeling. And machines are, I don't care what people say, I don't believe machines are ever going to feel. I don't think that they're going to be our emotional partners in any kind of sense. So I think that we're going to always need interactions with other people to be psychologically whole, in order to acquire the kind of uniquely human kind of thinking that involves a combination of heart and mind, if you will. And so I don't think we should be afraid of, although I'm not an expert on it, and I know that there are some people who are experts who are afraid. I don't think we should be afraid of AI, is sort of my feeling at the moment. But again, I have to say I'm not an expert on that.
Mm. And yeah, it's I guess maybe the gray area is how much in terms of soft skills can be attained by interacting with a machine versus with another human being. Um,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's at least that I what I think is what I think really is kind of scary. So I read an advertisement a few months ago. So you can buy this robot doll for your child that only says nice things to your child. This is your robot friend, right? Only says nice things. It's programmed to say nice things to you.
hmm,
And it's programmed to answer certain of your questions. The really scary thing is it also records all this, and your mom can listen to it at any time. So you think you're having this private discussion with your little robot doll, but your mom is attuned to it at
hmm,
some point. I think this is a horrid toy, partly because it's one more way of spying on children, but also because this is not a real interaction. This is not the way a real friend would. A real friend doesn't always agree with you. A real friend says mean things to you sometimes, but a real friend does it in a context where this is a real friend doing this. This is real. This is a person doing this.
hmm,
And I can't imagine programming a doll or any kind of robot, even in the future, where the interaction is going to be as human and as natural as occurs when it's a real friend.
hmm, hmm. So maybe interactions with a machine are kind of useful if we want to raise machine-like beings. Um, Maybe that's kind of the lesson there. But all right. Well, thank you very much. We've covered a lot of ground. Hopefully, it's been useful to listeners. And any parting comments on anything we've discussed today? And then we'll do part two, covering some other topics on another date. But
Well, no, thank you. I've been happy to be on. I'll avoid parting comments because if I do, I'll probably continue on
Yeah,
forever.
yeah.
And I know we
All
both
right.
have to leave at this point.
Yeah.
So
All right. Thank you, Peter.
thank you. Bye bye.